In the U.S. government, the power to send troops into harm's way is split between Congress and the president. This division is not just a technicality, it's a fundamental part of the American system of checks and balances, designed to ensure that no single branch can unilaterally plunge the nation into conflict. The framers of the Constitution, wary of the dangers of concentrated power, deliberately crafted a system where the decision to go to war would require both deliberation and consensus. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to declare war, allocate funding for military operations, and oversee the conduct of armed conflict. This legislative power was intended to make war a matter of public debate, not just executive will. At the same time, the president is named Commander-in-Chief, responsible for leading the armed forces and responding to immediate threats. This role allows the executive branch to act swiftly in times of crisis, but it also opens the door to potential overreach. This division was designed to prevent unilateral decisions about war. The idea was to force cooperation and debate so that the gravest decisions, those of life and death, would not rest on the shoulders of one person alone. Over the years, this tension has sparked repeated clashes between the White House and Congress. From Korea to Kosovo, from Iraq to Libya, presidents have often acted first and sought approval later, while Congress has struggled to assert its constitutional prerogatives. Presidents argue they need flexibility to act quickly, especially in a world where threats can emerge in an instant, and waiting for congressional approval could mean missing a critical window to protect American interests or lives. Meanwhile, Congress insists on its constitutional duty to authorize military force, warning that unchecked executive power could lead to endless wars and erode democratic accountability. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 was Congress's attempt to reclaim authority after Vietnam, a conflict that had escalated without a formal declaration of war, and with limited oversight. The law was meant to restore balance and ensure that the people's representatives had a say before troops were sent into prolonged combat. It requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of military action, providing transparency and a check on executive power. The law also limits troop deployments to 60 days without explicit congressional approval, aiming to prevent open-ended conflicts. Yet presidents have often challenged the law's constitutionality, arguing that it infringes on their powers as commander-in-chief. This ongoing dispute has kept the struggle alive for decades, with each administration testing the boundaries of executive authority. This week, the debate reignited over Venezuela, as Democrats and some Republicans pushed for congressional oversight before any military action. They argued that the lessons of past conflicts demand a more cautious, deliberative approach. Their move triggered a fierce procedural battle with Republican leaders and the White House, highlighting just how contentious and unresolved this issue remains. The result? Another chapter in the ongoing constitutional tug-of-war, a debate that continues to shape American democracy and the nation's role in the world. In early 2019, the Senate found itself at the center of a heated debate over the limits of presidential authority. The focus was a War Powers Resolution on Venezuela, introduced by Senator Tim Kaine, a longtime advocate for congressional oversight on matters of war and peace. Unlike previous War Powers resolutions, which often came in response to military action already underway, this one was preemptive, designed to require explicit congressional approval before any U.S. military intervention in Venezuela could even be considered. Lawmakers were alarmed by the Trump administration's increasingly aggressive rhetoric and worried that after years of tension with the Maduro regime, the White House might move toward intervention without consulting Congress or the American people. Supporters of the resolution argued that Congress must assert its constitutional authority before a crisis erupts, not after the fact when the nation is already committed. They called for a robust public debate and a clear, transparent stance on the limits of presidential war powers, insisting that the American people deserve to know where their representatives stood. The resolution forced senators to go on record. Should the president have a blank check for military action in Venezuela, or should Congress reclaim its constitutional role as the branch that decides when the nation goes to war? For Democrats, the measure was also a direct challenge to President Trump's expansive view of executive power, and a statement that no president, regardless of party, should be able to bypass Congress on such grave decisions. The ultimate goal was to set a lasting precedent for future crises, ensuring that Congress would always have a real, meaningful say before the country entered another conflict. In the end, the stakes were about far more than Venezuela. They were about the very balance of power in American government and the enduring question of who decides when the nation goes to war. To block the Venezuela resolution, Senate Republicans used a procedural tool, the point of order. A point of order is an objection claiming Senate rules are being violated, halting proceedings until the presiding officer rules. If the ruling is appealed, the full Senate votes on whether to uphold it. Republicans argued the resolution was invalid because there were no U.S. hostilities in Venezuela, so it didn't qualify for Expedited War Powers Act procedures. This rare move aimed to dismiss the resolution on a technicality, avoiding debate on its substance. If sustained, the point of order would instantly kill the resolution. It was a high-stakes gamble to protect presidential authority and avoid a divisive vote. Senate Republicans insisted the debate was unnecessary. No U.S. troops were fighting in Venezuela. They argued the War Powers Resolution applies only when hostilities are imminent or ongoing, making Keynes' proposal moot. Republicans accused Democrats of political theater, trying to score points against Trump. The White House pointed to the success of Operation Absolute Resolve, which captured Maduro without a military invasion. Private assurances were given. No military action was planned. For many senators, this was enough to justify blocking the resolution on procedural grounds. The strategy unified Republicans and peeled away wavering support. This procedural tactic wasn't new. Democrats had used it in 2024 to block a GOP war powers resolution on U.S. troops near Gaza. The move had sparked heated debate at the time, with both parties accusing each other of playing politics with national security. But for seasoned lawmakers, it was just another example of how the Senate's complex rules can be wielded as powerful tools, or weapons, depending on who holds the gavel. Back then, Democrats argued the resolution was moot because troops weren't engaged in hostilities and killed it with a point of order. Their reasoning was that without active combat, the resolution had no practical effect, so why even bring it to a vote? This technicality frustrated Republicans, who saw it as a way to avoid a tough conversation about U.S. military involvement abroad. Republicans now pointed to that precedent, claiming they were simply applying the same rules. They argued that if Democrats could use Senate procedure to their advantage, then so could they. The memory of that earlier maneuver was still fresh, and it gave the GOP a ready-made justification for their own actions. If a resolution about troops near a war zone was moot, they argued, one about Venezuela, where no troops were present, certainly was. The logic was simple. If the Senate could dismiss a debate over active deployments, surely it could do the same for a situation where American forces weren't even on the ground. This argument resonated with many, even as it frustrated those hoping for a broader debate. This history gave Republicans political cover and made it harder for Democrats to claim unfairness. After all, both sides had now used the same playbook. The back and forth over procedure became less about principle and more about precedent, with each party citing the other's past actions as justification for their own. Both parties have used Senate rules to their advantage when it suits them. These maneuvers are part of a long tradition in Congress, where the letter of the law often matters as much as its spirit. For lawmakers, knowing the rules and how to bend them can be just as important as winning votes. The precedent made the GOP's move seem less radical and more like business as usual. In the eyes of many observers, it was just another example of the Senate's endless chess game, where today's outrage can become tomorrow's accepted norm. In the Senate, what goes around comes around. The cycle of procedural tactics and political payback continues, reminding everyone that in this chamber history has a way of repeating itself. The fate of the resolution hinged on a handful of Republicans willing to break ranks. 5. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Todd Young, Josh Hawley, and Rand Paul initially sided with Democrats to begin debate. Paul and Young, longtime advocates for congressional war powers, were unsurprising supporters. Collins and Murkowski, known moderates, signaled discomfort with unchecked presidential authority. Hawley's support was the biggest surprise, given his usual alignment with Trump. Their votes gave Democrats hope for a bipartisan win. But the real test was whether these senators would hold firm under pressure. All eyes were on them as the final vote approached. The fragile coalition collapsed when Senator Josh Hawley flipped his vote. After initially supporting debate, he switched to back the Republican point of order, dooming the resolution. Hawley's reversal followed direct assurances from Trump officials no U.S. combat troops would be sent to Venezuela. The administration argued that Operation Absolute Resolve had achieved its goals without war. Hawley now claimed the resolution addressed a non-existent threat, aligning with the GOP's argument. His switch was decisive, fracturing the bipartisan group and ensuring the resolution's defeat. The episode showed how a single senator can tip the balance in a divided chamber. White House lobbying proved effective, and the coalition for congressional oversight fell apart. The procedural tactic worked, and the president's authority remained intact. The Venezuela resolution was dead. Operation Absolute Resolve, a covert mission that captured Maduro, was the White House's main argument against the resolution. The administration touted it as proof that their strategy worked: no invasion, no war. Trump and his allies insisted Congress didn't need to intervene, since the crisis was resolved without large-scale military action. Trump publicly attacked the resolution and the Republicans who supported it, framing it as an attempt to weaken his authority. The administration's message: the president needs flexibility, and Congress shouldn't tie his hands. With the operation's success, they argued from a position of strength. Their stance, combined with targeted lobbying, carried the day. The defeat of the Venezuela resolution leaves the core constitutional question unresolved. The Senate's procedural move protected presidential authority, but didn't settle when Congress should authorize military force. For Democrats and anti-interventionist Republicans, it was a setback and a lesson in the power of Senate rules. The precedent war powers resolutions can be dismissed as moot before conflict begins. The debate over war powers is far from over. Future crises will test these boundaries again. The founders left the lines blurry, ensuring ongoing tension between decisive action and deliberation. This week's events were just another round in the centuries-old struggle. The balance of power shifted, but nothing was permanently settled. The tug-of-war over who decides on war and peace continues. The story is far from finished.